Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to get into something pretty exciting. We're going to break down how to build a YouTube podcast that goes viral, especially with something like, college basketball picks with March Madness just around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, we've got this really in-depth blueprint someone sent us, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's a whole game plan.
The whole game plan, exactly.
Wow.
And I think, our goal here is to really dissect it, to pull out the core elements and, really figure out, like, what are the essential strategies that you need if you want to create something that's going to cut through the noise?
Absolutely.
Especially in this niche, it's pretty crowded.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, looking at what we have here, it looks like the big focus is on engagement, right? The source material really seems to stress that. It's not just about like predicting winners, it's about how do you create content that's really engaging. And they're recommending things like, high energy analysis, making these really bold calls and really, and I think this is key, like getting that audience deeply involved.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it, that interaction, the
Yeah.
engagement. Because ultimately, right, if someone is coming to YouTube for this type of content, there are a lot of options out there. So what's going to make them stick with your channel?
Yeah, for sure. And so for those listening, whether you're thinking about like getting into the online sports commentary game yourself, or maybe you're just interested in like what makes stuff tick online, what goes viral and all that.
Yeah, like the psychology of
Yeah,
it.
the psychology of it.
Why does certain content resonate more?
Exactly.
Exactly. This deep dive, like, it should give you some pretty cool insights, I think.
Definitely. And one of the things that really jumps out at me, like right away in this blueprint, is this idea of grabbing attention.
Right. Immediately.
Immediately, that hook. Yeah, like the first 10 seconds are crucial.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's kind of like the tip off.
Exactly.
You got to come out, you got to
Yeah.
be strong. And the blueprint actually gives us like a few specific hooks, a few different strategies. What are your thoughts on these? Like, why are these particular hooks recommended, do you think?
You know what's so fascinating about these is how they tap into those, like, natural things we're drawn to as people.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. The first one is that shocking upset call. And they even give an example, like, underdog team is Sweet 16 bound and Vegas is wrong. And and I think what happens is that immediately sparks that curiosity,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh, do they know
Or,
something?
like, I need to know more. Yeah.
Right. Like, what is it that I'm missing? And I think especially when you're talking about something like sports betting, where people are trying to find an edge, get those wins, that kind of statement
Yeah.
suggests you have information that other people don't.
Right. It's not a scoop.
And I think we're all kind of drawn to the unexpected, right? The underdog story, the upset. It's inherently more interesting than just seeing the favorite win again.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that element of surprise. And it also establishes you right from the start as someone who's not afraid to challenge conventional wisdom, who's not just going with the flow. And I think that can be really compelling.
I think you're right. It sets you up as an authority, like you know your stuff. And then there's that other hook, where you make that bold take against a popular team.
Right. Like if you're betting on popular team this March, you're wasting money. Here's why.
Yeah, and that one's almost guaranteed to like get a reaction.
Oh, for sure.
People are going to be talking about that one. What do you think? Like, why do you think taking on the favorites or the perceived favorites is so powerful in that opening?
Yeah, I think that one really plays on a couple of psychological levers.
Mhm.
Like first of all, you got to remember, people are really passionate about sports. And when it comes to those big, well-known teams, they're not just fans, they're almost invested emotionally.
Yeah.
So if you come out and you're like, hey, you know what? Everybody loves this team, but they're overrated or they're not going to do as well as people think, that immediately gets people's attention, right?
You're either going to be really intrigued or really mad.
Right. Even if it's just to be like, let me hear what this person has to say. They're crazy.
Yeah. Prove me wrong.
Exactly. And then the other thing is, it also, like that first hook, it positions you as someone who's not afraid to think for themselves. You're not swayed by the crowd, the popular opinion.
Mhm.
And that kind of independent thinking, it can build trust, right? It can make people think, okay, this person's not just going with the flow, they're actually doing their own analysis.
It's like the David and Goliath story, but with sports betting.
Total.
It's like, you're going up against these big teams.
Yeah.
I like that. And then the third hook that the blueprint lays out is more about, like, let's say a hype montage. It's about showing off, your past successes, your past predictions, and sort of building that up. How do you think that works to grab someone's attention?
I think that's all about establishing credibility fast. you know?
Yeah.
If someone's landing on your YouTube video for the first time, they don't know you, you're a stranger to them.
Hmm.
But if you can immediately show, hey, here are all these times I've been right in the past.
You got receipts.
Yeah, you got the receipts, exactly. You're basically saying, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You're backing it up. And that builds confidence in your analysis,
Yeah.
right? Makes people more likely to stick around and see what your current predictions are because they're thinking, okay, maybe this person does have an edge.
Right. Okay. So you've nailed the opening. You got their attention. Now you got to keep them watching. And the blueprint really emphasizes structuring your content into these like snackable segments. What's the thinking there? Especially on YouTube. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, because we live in this world now, especially online, where everything's so fast-paced, right?
Yeah.
People's attention spans are, like, shorter than ever.
Scroll, scroll, scroll.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so these shorter, more focused segments, they're designed to deliver that value quickly
Okay.
and keep that engagement high.
Move in.
Yeah. And I think by breaking the content down into, like, distinct sections, you're also making it more digestible, right?
Yeah. More bite-sized.
Exactly. And more shareable, too, because maybe someone doesn't have time to watch a 20-minute video, but they can watch a 3-minute segment. And it's like, oh, that was interesting. Let me share this with my friends.
That makes a lot of sense. And it seems like the blueprint really thought this through because they break down like 4 main segments, the first one being this week's LOCK bets.
Right.
So what's the core idea here?
So basically, this is where you're presenting your strongest picks, right? The bets you have the absolute highest confidence in. And they emphasize that this isn't just like, a gut feeling.
Right.
These aren't just hunches.
Yeah.
They need to be grounded in a combination of things. You need the statistical analysis. Like they say, eye test breakdown, what are you actually seeing when you're watching the games?
Right.
And the example they give is, team covers the spread 80% of the time when they're playing ranked opponents.
Okay, so you got the data to back it up.
Exactly. You're giving that data point to support your lock.
I like that. Okay, so it's not just what you think, it's a blend, right?
It's both.
Data and intuition.
Exactly.
Awesome. The next segment they're recommending is called Upset Alerts.
Sleepers to watch.
Sleepers to watch, yeah.
Love this one.
And this feels like the one that, like, is going to really get people excited.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Big time. This is where you're identifying those, like, under-the-radar teams,
Right.
The ones with the potential to pull off that huge surprise. And they actually give a great example in here. St. Peter's 2.0, Meat Team. Immediately you're referencing past Cinderella stories. And I think that just taps into, like, the whole spirit of March Madness, right?
The excitement.
The excitement. Anything can happen,
Yeah.
right? It's that one shining moment, And again, you're going beyond just, like, saying you like a team. You're going to want to pull in those advanced stats, like KenPom rankings,
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about those.
Right, so KenPom rankings, they're basically these advanced statistical rankings, that evaluate a team's offensive and defensive efficiency.
Okay.
And then other metrics, too, like offensive rebounding percentages, free throw percentage in clutch situations, all those things, they can give you a real edge in understanding, like, okay, why might this team, even though they're not a big name, why might they be poised for an upset?
Okay, so this isn't just you, throwing darts at a bracket. Like, there's a methodology.
You've got a system.
You got a system, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, love that. And then what about the flip side of that? Fade these overrated teams.
Oh, yeah, this one's good, too, right?
Like, that's another one that's going to get people going.
For sure. Because here, you're essentially, like, shining a light on the teams that are getting a lot of hype, maybe a little too much hype. And the example they give, again, it's so good. Blue Blood program is getting too much hype. Here's the flaw nobody's talking about.
Ooh, controversial.
Right. And I think what's interesting here is you're offering this kind of, like, contrarian perspective, right? But it's still backed by analysis. And you might even be identifying discrepancies between, like, the public perception of a team and what the actual betting value is, what they call in the blueprint Vegas versus reality.
Right. So you're not only giving people insights, like if they're betting, which I'm sure a lot of people are.
Oh, absolutely.
But you're also giving them a new way to look at these teams.
Exactly. To see the whole picture.
Yeah. Love that. Okay. And then the last segment they suggest in this structure is fan debate plus call to action.
Yep. Can't forget that one.
And this seems like a super important one for building that community around your podcast.
It is. And especially on YouTube, this is, like, gold. Because YouTube's algorithm, it loves channels that have strong audience engagement.
Okay.
So when you're actively encouraging viewers to leave comments,
Mm.
participate in discussions, whether it's asking them what's your hottest take
Yeah.
or tag a friend who would disagree with this prediction, you're doing two things. You're fostering that interaction,
Yeah.
but you're also making your audience feel like they're part of a conversation. They're not just passively watching.
Right, like their opinion matters.
Exactly.
That's great. Okay, now let's get beyond like the audio and the structure, right?
Yeah.
Because this is YouTube, so the visual presentation has got to be key. What are we thinking here in terms of like the visual appeal?
Yeah, and the blueprint says it all, visually addictive. That's the goal. And I think the key takeaway here is simply talking about basketball. It's not enough.
Yeah.
You've got to show it,
You got to bring it to life.
Yeah, you've got to make it dynamic. So think like side-by-side statistical comparisons of teams.
Yeah.
Like that could be really powerful for visually illustrating your analysis.
I gotcha.
Use highlight reels of the players that you're discussing, right?
Yeah.
It helps people connect with those players. It reinforces your points. And then they even suggest using a green screen, which I think is really cool, to show your reactions.
Oh, yeah, to those big moments like the buzzer beaters and stuff.
Exactly. So it's not just stats, it's you,
It's
right?
your personality.
It's your personality coming through. And people connect with that authenticity, those genuine reactions. It makes the content so much more dynamic and entertaining. And then, this might sound simple, but don't underestimate the power of on-screen text.
Okay.
And even memes, right?
Keep it fun.
Yeah. Keep it light. This can add humor. It can emphasize crucial points. And it makes the content, more engaging, especially for like a younger audience who's used to communicating that way online.
Yeah, it's how they talk.
Right? So imagine like you make a bold prediction, it comes true, and boom, a perfect meme pops up on screen. That's going to get shared.
That's so shareable.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so we've got, we talked about the engaging content. We've got the visuals. Now the big question, how do people find you?
Ah, yes. The age-old question.
Right. I mean, there are millions of videos out there. How do you cut through all that?
Right. You need SEO.
Search engine optimization, yep.
You got to get it right.
So crucial, yeah.
Because having amazing content is only half the battle, right?
Yeah.
You need to make sure that when someone goes on YouTube and they search for like college basketball pics, your video pops up.
Right. Or even that YouTube's recommending it to them.
Exactly. And the blueprint gives us some really great examples of these SEO-friendly titles.
Yeah, these are good.
So tell me, like, what are some of the things that you notice about these titles? Like, why are they so effective?
Well, first of all, I think they're super specific and they get right to the point. Like, they're not vague at all.
Yeah.
Like, March Madness 2025, 3 sleeper teams that will win you money.
Okay, I like that one.
Right away, you know what you're going to get. And it promises something.
You're going to win some money.
Yeah, you're going to make some money, exactly.
Love it.
And then you have, like, why team will win it all. Analytics breakdown.
Okay, so that's more for the serious fan, right?
Yeah, the one who really wants that deep dive.
The stats nerd.
The stats, exactly.
Love it.
And then there's the one that's like, Vegas hates this pick, but I'm all in. And that's the one that just makes you curious.
Oh, yeah. What is this insider knowledge?
Yeah, like, what is it?
I got to know.
You gotta know. And I think they all do a really great job of using keywords, words that people are actually going to type in the search bar.
Words that people are searching for.
So it's about being smart about your wording. And I think the thumbnail, that little picture, that's almost as important as the title.
Oh, yeah. That's your first impression.
Like the first impression.
Visually.
Exactly. And the blueprint gives us a few strategies for the thumbnails, too.
Yeah, they do.
What do they recommend?
So they say using your face, with an expressive emotion.
Okay.
Really showing that shock or that confidence.
Drawing people in.
Yeah, it makes it personal, right?
Yeah.
And then they suggest using big, bold text that's easy to read, like 12-seed upset alert.
Right to the point.
Boom. You know exactly what you're getting.
Yep.
And then, of course, incorporate those team logos.
Yeah.
With some well-placed emojis.
Keep it fun.
Yeah, little money bag emoji.
A fire.
A fire, yeah. Just to, add that visual interest.
Makes it pop.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think the whole point with the titles and thumbnails is to make it super clear what the video is about and make people want to click. Yeah, clickbait done right, I guess you could say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got your great content, you've got your eye-catching visuals. Now you got to get the word out.
Strategic promotion.
Strategic promotion, yes. Where are we focusing those efforts according to this blueprint?
So they actually have recommendations for a bunch of different platforms, which I think is
Just
smart, you know?
to reach different people.
Yeah, because not everybody is hanging out on the same platform, right?
Right.
So they talk about YouTube Shorts and TikTok, great for those like short, punchy clips, right?
Okay, yeah.
And they give a good example, this 15 seed is beating Kentucky Bucket.
Okay.
Super bold.
Bold.
Right. And those are really shareable, those kinds of clips.
Hmm.
And they can drive traffic back to your main podcast.
Makes sense. And they also mentioned Reddit, right?
Yeah, they love Reddit, specifically college basketball.
That makes sense.
Right. It's like a direct line to the fans. And I think what's smart is they suggest posting something a little controversial to spark discussion.
Like a hot take.
Yeah, like my model says team is overrated, change my mind.
Yeah.
And then people get like, oh, what is this? I got to see this model.
I got to go check that out.
And it drives them back to your YouTube.
Yeah, it's smart.
It's good strategy.
And then there's Twitter.
Or X, as they call it now.
Or X, yes.
Right, right. But yeah, and I think what they emphasize here is engaging with the established basketball analysts.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it's about building credibility
Okay.
and maybe, tapping into their audience a little bit.
Oh, so their followers might see you.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So if you're retweeting them or asking them for their takes, hey, what's your craziest Sweet 16 pick?
That's crazy.
Right. You're inserting yourself into the conversation, and you might attract some of those viewers who follow those analysts.
That's cool. And they have this other idea of live picks challenges.
Oh, yeah. Those can be really fun.
Yeah.
And it's a great way to engage with your audience.
In real time.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, you might even get people who just stumble upon the live stream.
Or just browsing.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay, now we talked about fan engagement earlier with that fan debate segment.
Right.
But the blueprint really emphasizes fueling that interaction, throughout the content. Why is that so important, especially on YouTube?
It's the algorithm.
The algorithm, yeah.
YouTube loves engagement.
Okay.
So the more people are interacting with your videos, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing,
Right.
the more likely YouTube is to recommend your content to new viewers.
So it's like a snowball effect.
Exactly.
The more engagement you get, the more people will see it.
And the blueprint suggests a bunch of different ways to get that engagement going. Polls.
Oh, yeah. Easy.
Easy peasy.
Who do you think is going to win? UConn or the field?
Exactly. And then hot take contests, where you reward the most insightful comment or the most outrageous comment even.
Oh, that's fun.
Right. So it incentivizes people to really put some thought into their comments.
Yeah.
And then, of course, live debates.
Oh, those can get heated.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you're talking about something like, Duke versus UNC or something like that.
Those rivalry games.
Right. But that's good. That's what you want. You want people to feel passionate,
Yeah.
And then they'll keep coming back for more.
Absolutely. Now, one thing I've noticed, and I think you've picked up on it too, is that this blueprint really hammers home this idea of embracing a bold persona.
Be bold.
Be bold. So can you explain why is that so crucial in this kind of competitive landscape?
Because if you're just another person out there making these safe, kind of middle of the road predictions,
You're going to get lost in the shuffle.
you're going to blend in. No one's going to remember you.
Okay.
Right. But if you're confident and you're making these strong statements, even if they're not always right,
Yeah, even if you're wrong.
people are going to remember you.
Right.
They're going to talk about you. The example they give in the blueprint is perfect. If you're not betting on underdog, you're missing the easiest money of March. Wow.
Wow.
Right. That's a statement.
That's a take.
And even if that team doesn't win, people are going to be like, oh, remember that person who said that? They were so sure.
Yeah, and you'll either be right and look like a genius.
Exactly.
Or you'll be wrong and people will still remember you.
And they'll come back to see what you're saying next.
Yeah, to see if you were right this time.
Exactly. So it's about having that strong point of view and not being afraid to, put yourself out there.
And I think it's a great way to build a brand too, because people are going to start to associate you with a certain style, a certain type of content.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the blueprint also gives us a sample, a 30-second opening script
Oh, yeah.
to kind of see how all this comes together.
Let's break it down. Because what I think is so interesting is, it's only 30 seconds, but they're packing in so much good stuff. It starts with that March Madness hook. It creates that sense of urgency right away. And then, boom, it makes this gold claim. This 4 seed, they're a ticking time bomb. They're going to bust your bracket.
Ooh, spicy.
Right. And then they immediately pivot to highlighting a potential Cinderella team. They're like, but watch out for this mid-major team. They're going to shock everyone.
Love it.
And then they tease that, like, insider information, Vegas doesn't want you to see this.
Ooh, yeah.
And then they basically say, hey, I'm here to help you win. Like, I'm going to give you those winning picks.
That's great.
And then it ends with this really strong call to action. Let's dive in.
It's perfect.
Well,
It really just encapsulates, like, the whole strategy, right?
It does. It's all about grabbing that attention, promising value,
Yeah.
and making people excited to watch the rest of the video.
Amazing. Okay, so let's wrap this up. If someone wants to create a YouTube podcast for college basketball picks and they really want to go viral, what are the essential ingredients based on this blueprint?
Okay, so strong hook right from the start.
Grab them?
Got to grab them, yeah. And then you need those engaging, snackable segments. Keep people watching.
Keep them coming back for more.
Exactly. And don't forget the visuals. Those are huge on YouTube. Make it dynamic. Make it relevant. And then you need to think about SEO, titles, thumbnails. Make it easy for people to find you. And then strategic promotion. Get the word out there on all those different platforms. And then I think, most importantly, foster that fan interaction.
Make it a community.
Yeah, make it a conversation. And be bold.
Do both.
Have a strong personality. Don't be afraid to make those big predictions.
Love it.
Because that's what's going to make you stand out.
Well, this has been a really fun and interesting deep dive into the world of, creating a successful YouTube podcast, particularly for sports picks, college basketball picks. And it's clear that it's not just about luck. It's about having a plan. It's about strategy, and it's about execution.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these lessons, they could apply to other types of online content too.
Right.
It's all about understanding what your audience wants and giving it to them in a way that's engaging and entertaining.
Absolutely. So for those of you listening, as you think about all of this, and especially, the importance of those bold predictions and building that engaged audience, I want you to think about, like, what are the broader lessons here that could apply to other areas of online content creation? What are you involved in? What are you interested in? What are you curious about? Because there's always something to learn, right?
Right.
Especially in this, ever-evolving digital world.
The landscape is always changing.
It is. And so it's about, like, staying ahead of the curve and being willing to, experiment and try new things.
Absolutely. That's how you find what works.
And that's what this is all about, right?
It is.
Figuring out what works.
That's the fun part.
It is.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today on the Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.